Hi everyone, welcome to the third episode of Frontend Interview Questions. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you that I have a website where all the questions are organized by topic, each with a handy timeline. You can quickly go through the questions and revisit any challenging areas. Also, don't forget to leave in the comments the questions you've been asked in your own interviews. Let's get started. We're diving into HTML and exploring list types. In HTML, there are three main types of lists. The first type is the unordered list, created with ul and li tags. Each item in an unordered list is marked with a bullet point. The second type is the ordered list. This list uses ol and li tags, and each item is automatically numbered. The third type is the definition list. It's created using dl as the main wrapper, dt for terms or headings, and double D for the description or definition. You can also nest lists within each other, allowing you to create multi-level lists of various types. How to semantically mark up an image with a caption. To properly mark up an image with a caption, you can use two tags, figure, where the image is inserted using the img tag, and fig caption, which is placed inside figure and contains the descriptive text. It's important to note that using these tags doesn't replace the need for the alt attribute on the image. The caption can be related to one image or several. By using this structure, we achieve not only semantically correct markup, but also improve accessibility. Now, screen readers will read out the text with a note that it's associated with a specific image on the page. Next CSS topic, the difference between margin and padding. Margin is the outer space or the distance between the border of the block and another element. Padding is the inner space or the distance between the border of the block and its content. Both properties are part of the so-called box model, which determines the final size of the block on the page. The difference between display none and visibility hidden. Both properties are used to hide an element on the page, but they work in different ways. The display none property completely removes the element from the HTML page. The element is fully removed from the document's main flow, and the only place it still exists is in the DOM tree. Additionally, its content becomes inaccessible to search engine crawlers. On the other hand, the visibility hidden property makes the element invisible on the page, but it remains in the document's main flow and still occupies its allocated space. Plus, the element and its content remain accessible to search engines. The difference between block and inline elements. The main difference between block and inline elements is that a block element, by default, takes up the full width of its container, while an inline element adjusts to the size of its content. Because of this, block elements are always stacked on top of each other, whereas multiple inline elements can sit in the same row. This explanation is usually enough, but if we dive a little deeper, block elements can have custom dimensions, width and height. Inline elements, however, don't support this. Block elements also support margin and padding both vertically and horizontally, while for inline elements, only horizontal margins are applied. Top and bottom margins don't work. The difference between adaptive and responsive design. Adaptive design involves creating several preset versions of the same website, each tailored for different devices. In an adaptive site, there are multiple versions of the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files for a single page. The appropriate set of files is loaded depending on the user's device, such as a mobile, tablet, or desktop. Responsive design, on the other hand, dynamically adjusts the layout based on screen width. Here, there's only one set of files, but CSS, through media queries and other techniques, reshapes the layout and styling based on screen resolution. So adaptive design delivers fixed versions for different devices, while responsive design flexibly adjusts to the screen size. The next section is about JavaScript. So what is a scope? A scope in JavaScript is the context in which we have access to variables or functions. JavaScript has three types of scopes. Global scope. Variables and functions declared in this scope are global, meaning they're added to the global namespace and can be accessed from anywhere in the code. Functional or local scope. Variables and functions declared inside a function are only accessible within that function and any nested functions. Trying to access them outside of this function will result in an error. Block scope. Introduced with ES6, this scope applies to variables declared with let and const inside curly braces, known as a block. This could be a simple if-else block, for example. Variables declared with var don't adhere to block scope rules. A scope essentially sets the rules for finding variables. First, JavaScript looks for a variable in the local scope. If it's not found, the search continues in the outer scope, and so on, up to the global scope. The difference between let, const, and var. First, a variable declared with var is hoisted, meaning that if we try to access it before its initialization, we'll just get undefined. With let and const, however, this will result in an error. Second, they have different scopes. Let and const are block scoped, not function scoped. In other words, if they're declared inside curly braces, they're only accessible within that block and any nested blocks. A variable declared with var ignores this block scope and can be accessed outside of it. Finally, the difference between let and const is that a variable declared with const becomes a constant, which means it cannot be reassigned. Attempting to do so will throw an error. However, while you can modify properties of an object declared with const, you can't completely reassign the object itself. What are higher order functions? This question often causes confusion, but it's actually quite simple. Higher order functions are functions that either take another function as an argument or return a function. You can find examples of such functions even in native JavaScript. These include functions like map, for each, reduce, filter, and others, which take a function as an argument and apply it to each element of an array. In today's episode, we're introducing a new section of questions, JS DOM. Here we'll dive into questions related to how JavaScript works in the browser. And let's start with the first one. What is the DOM? DOM, or Document Object Model, is a document model created by the browser in the computer's memory based on the HTML code received from the server. Generally, this explanation is enough, but let's add a bit more detail. Put simply, HTML code is the text of the page, while the DOM is a set of connected objects that the browser generates when parsing that text. Essentially, the DOM is an interface that allows JavaScript to interact with page elements. The DOM has a tree structure, which is why it's often called the DOM tree. We can navigate through this tree, modify elements, and add events or various handlers to them. What is event propagation? Event propagation is a mechanism that triggers when an event occurs in a document. The event propagates from the window object to the element that triggered it, sequentially affecting all ancestors of the target element. There are three main phases of event propagation: capturing, target, and bubbling. Capturing. In this initial phase, the event starts from the root of the document and travels down the DOM tree toward the target element. Target. The event reaches the target element, also known as the event target. Bubbling. In the final phase, the event bubbles back up to the window, triggering event handlers on each parent element along the way. What is event delegation? Event delegation is a development technique where, instead of adding multiple identical event handlers to every single element, you attach just one handler to a common parent. For example, let's say we have a table with 100 by 100 cells, and we want each cell to change color when clicked. One way to do this is to add an event handler to every cell as we create the table. In this case, we'd end up with 10,000 event handlers, each consuming browser resources. This number alone hints that this approach is far from optimal. Instead, we can use event delegation. All we need is to add a single event handler to the table element itself and then use event target to detect which cell was clicked, allowing us to change its color directly. And, as usual, we have a practical task. You need to create a function that takes a name as input and returns the initials. Even if the name is written in lowercase, the initials should still be capitalized. So, let's start with the basic version. First, as always, we split the string into an array. But instead of splitting by each character, we'll split it by words. For this, we pass a space character to the split method. Next comes the trickiest step. Once we have an array of elements, we need to go through this array with map, slicing off the first letter of each word using the slice method. Just a quick reminder, slice takes two arguments, both of which are numbers. The first argument specifies the index where selection begins, and the second defines where it ends. So by passing 0 and 1, we're selecting only the first character. Then we use to uppercase to capitalize it and add a period afterward. Now, the first letters are array contains uppercase initials of each word, each with a period at the end. Finally, all that's left to do is use join to turn the array into a string and return it. In the advanced level, the logic remains the same, but now we use method chaining to skip creating intermediate variables. And in ES6, we replace regular functions with arrow functions. Instead of string concatenation plus signs, we use a template string. That's pretty much everything for today. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next episodes. And remember, you can support the channel on Buy Me a Coffee or with a like. See you in the next video. Bye.